I always find this question quite interesting because for me, I wasn't a particular moment in my life where I decided I want to be an artist now. I was always creating as a kid, whether it was designing my own clothes, making hippos, doing whatever you did at school that I enjoyed. And I just find that it was when I went to the Slade in 2011 that I realized I had a connection with painting. And that was through my interest in color that I've always had since I was a kid. So for me, becoming an artist was just about understanding that I loved color and just wanted to work with that specifically. And that came through in the form of painting. And so there wasn't really a defining moment where I just thought, you know what, when I grow up, I want to be an artist. No, I was at school, and I think a lot of people at art school might relate to this, where it's just, no, I just want to continue. I want to make something, and I want to make things. And so in that sense, am I not already an artist? At what point do people really define the moment that they're an artist or not? I'm not really sure. So I just fell into this. I just kept going. And that's how I'm here. I mean, so I have a whole artist practice. So for me, my interest in painting stems from trying to understand identity through my own context and letting that become a questioning process for people that look at the work through the titles, hopefully. And so for me, the things that come into my work is the idea that if you bring in objects that you're drawn to, you're kind of trying to also see yourself for a moment. And so my paintings take from everything I'm drawn to. It can be the color of an object to a piece of music to the pattern of a piece of clothing that I can't stop wearing. And and then they become these abstract environments that almost seem like I'm looking in the mirror just for one moment. And that moment is whatever moment I am experiencing making the work. And I just believe that our identity is capturing many moments in our lives, and we just try and look back at those and try and understand who we are. But I think my practice has gone through many stages of questioning, and it's become almost about the art of being yourself and what that means in today's society, especially after the pandemic, where I just spent a long time with myself. I think all of us can relate. We had no choice but to be with ourselves in our homes. Even if we wanted to go outside, there was always a moment where you couldn't, which I think is really unusual for a society of today. And so when I look at how my practice has also evolved, which is where I was talking about bringing these objects into my work and letting them reflect me, they also became a moment of like comfort. They became really comforting objects to look at in my space because it was the one thing that stayed the same, which was looking at my paintings. So yeah, my practice can take on a lot of theories, I like to call them, because I think to be an artist is to be a theorist. So the work that was in 2019 was probably just before I started using pastels in my work. At that time, my painting language was to do a lot literally with what I just said about my practice, which was bringing in things I'm drawn to, especially one particular object in my life, which is my favorite cuddly toy since I was a kid, because that holds the most memories for me. And I think it's the thing I attach to my identity the most. And so a belly full for me will have things that other people wouldn't recognize, but for me, I see them all the time. And I think what's so interesting about being an artist is seeing your own work and knowing that no one sees it the way you do. Um, and then the works from 2021, and that's when I started bringing pastel into my work. So during the pandemic, I found that had to be home. I didn't actually have to be home considering I have the studio, but I chose to be home because I was just as equally scared as anyone else would be. And so I used my home as the focal point for my practice, which became drawing. And drawing was a way for me to kind of get out the anxiety of going through this new day-to-day life, and at the same time as an opportunity to explore a new medium, which was pastels, because I had a lot of them in my home, and I just spent a good few months in my home office drawing, and I filled up these notepads and these notebooks, and I had about 3 sketchbooks by the end of the pandemic that were just full of plays of color. And one thing that I really enjoyed about pastel is just the how easy it is to access color. So like differently to in a paint tube where you've got to look at the outside tester first, and then you've got to hope whatever's in the tube reflects however they've decided to display it. Whereas when you work with pastel, you have a stick that literally reflects the color it's going to be. And there was just something about having this collection of 200 pastels at least that just opened up my work to color in a new way. And I think that's what started to happen with the other paintings in the show. And also I would say that my practice became more about, if we're trying to think about identity and what it means to question yourself, as well as realize who you are, then part of that is just letting yourself go to the practice and letting yourself not be contaminated by premature questions, and just allowing your body to flow into the material. And I think that's what started to happen with the other paintings. There's a different way of me moving through the paintings because there's a different way of thinking about who I am. So I just think to be an artist means to play, and there's a lot of materials that I've never played with. I spent the first 6 years of painting only working with liquid, which is the medium that I use in most of my paintings. And I just think with every new form of media, there's a new opportunity within the work, and I'm an experimental painter. So it's not just oil pastels that came into my work or oil sticks. It was also acrylic paint. And now my paintings, I'm not sure at the time or during look, I blocked out the pandemic. So I can't really confirm at what moment I started using acrylic. But there was this moment of experimentation, exploration in my work during those 2 years that was really eye-opening for my practice. And yeah, I think the pastels were one fragment of it, but there's so many different things I still want to try. And so in my studio, I'm always experimenting with different methods. It's just that by the time it comes to the show, I might be showing just one thing that I've worked on recently, but it doesn't really kind of cover the broadness of experimentation that happens within my practice. It's changed. I think that I used to always work by myself. I had that same romanticism of the artist is by themselves in the studio and creates. But then the pandemic happened and I realized I wanted friends. I wanted to actually experience making work with people, because at school I was so used to it. There's nothing to say that an artist can't make work around people. And so now with my team, I've started letting that come into my process a bit more in terms of experimentation. I allow their knowledge to flow into what I can create with my own work. And by that, just I mean that they might help me put some masking tape on my painting. It's not that deep. But what is interesting is the conversations that go alongside making the work. And I think as a painter, it's not just about the paintings. I'm also a writer, and to write, I like to have conversations, whether that's with myself and it hits pen and paper, or I'm having conversations with people in my team whilst I'm painting, and it becomes part of the studio itself, whether it's note-taking or recording what I'm saying. It's just all these different forms of recording information and recording art, which can take, in my practice, not just painting, but writing and drawing, and hopefully one day installation, and maybe one day performance. Who knows? I'm very open-minded. I do get stage fright, so I don't know how open-minded I am, but I'm open to wherever my practice is going. And if that's going to take me along into things that I'm uncomfortable with, I think that's really exciting. It's interesting to talk about Japan because I've had maybe 7 experiences there. I would before the pandemic. I haven't been in the past 2 years, but it was a ritual of mine to go at least once or twice a year. And I've been doing that since I finished at the Slade. So it's been a while now. And I think every time I go back to Japan, my experience is so different. It connects with the work differently. But originally, when I went for the second time to do my exchange, that was when I actually started asking myself these questions about self and what identity means, because it can be really, it really throws you off to live in another country. Even if you love that country and you want to be there, it doesn't matter where you're from. You just have to get used to the culture shock of it. And I think what I found really interesting about Japan is that I had spent so many years engaging with the culture through its media, that, and by that I mean Japanese anime and cinema, that and that I had this familiarity with the place and the culture in a very limited form, but still more than most people that are going to go on just a holiday there. And I went there and I was still thrown off. And I think it was the frustrations of not understanding that disorientation you feel about going from A to B that led to me starting my whole practice. And even though I was painting before I went to Japan, I don't think I had an understanding of what my practice was yet until I was thrown into the deep end and realized what was important to me. And that was questioning identity in some form. And yeah, so now I'm in this weird position where Japan's really important for my practice and I still haven't been back. So I've kind of been romanticizing what it would be like to be there in some ways through my work. I think this is why a lot of my work from during the pandemic started to become a bit more, go from environments, let's say go from abstract environments to abstract landscapes, because there's something about the landscape of Japan that mesmerizes me. And I always paint what I'm drawn to, even if that's in the form of a memory. And I'm an abstract painter. I'm not trying to recreate Japan. I'm trying to understand my relationship with it. And I think that's what happens every time I go back. I'm always building on the relationship I have with it and having a continued conversation with it. And all the memories I have from childhood that led me to the interest in the place has also stayed with me. And it's just become this cumulative layered questioning that is actually really makes you nauseous as an artist. At least it makes me a bit nauseous, but it's really exciting. Japan is, I have to say, probably, let's go with it being my favorite, because it's the only place that I've visited 7 times in my life. And then there's places I want to go back to, but there's nowhere that will, if I had to choose between Japan and somewhere else, it's more likely I'm going to get on a flight to Japan. But going to Palm Springs in LA was, well, next to LA, was amazing, because I've never, look, I'm from the UK. We get mainly grey here. And what I was shocked about in Palm Springs was the mixture of flowers, desert climate, and then in the background you had these mountains full of snow. And I just didn't understand how the seasons can come together so beautifully. And so there's one painting called "And That Day She Remembered How to Purr," and it reminds me of that time I was in Palm Springs. And it wasn't painted with me thinking, oh, you know what, I miss Palm Springs. No, I think what happens for me is that my memories are trapped in the things that, or my emotions are trapped in things that are really important to me. So in the memory of being in Palm Springs, that's come into my work because the colors there really inspired me. And it's usually the colors of a place that will inspire me. I think what I find amazing about Japan is how many mountains there are. and also and how they're just full of trees. You know, we don't get that in the UK. We don't have any of that. And so I remember the first time I went to Japan being like, oh my God, this is a thing. And I think every time I travel, I'm like, oh my God, this is a thing. And I realized that everything I've seen on TV does actually kind of exist. And I think that's always that's really interesting for your mind to kind of get used to the idea that there's a reality within TV that exists, especially when you're talking to the girl that spent most of her time watching TV as a kid. And by TV, I mean anime. I wasn't watching what everyone else was watching, not at my time anyway. But now I think what's so interesting to see is how, because there is this, I think anime has become quite global in a sense, and more people are watching it. You see more people going to Japan, and you just have this feeling of like, oh, but I went there first. But it doesn't really matter. I think what's interesting is that people can connect with the work, and people might be able to understand that even though I don't literally take from Japanese animations, there's something about color and Japan that makes sense to me and that I'm constantly questioning. And I think that's what I like about Okata's show. It's just when you look at the artists in there, there's this affinity with color that you don't find all the time in shows. And I think that's what is most exciting to me. I mean, yeah, of course it does. I think it's just like looking at an old photograph of yourself and saying, who's that? Like, I just find that I haven't had the longest career, but I've made quite a few works, and they're always evolving, and they always evolve at a pace that even I'm shocked by. And so whenever I look back at my work, I'm always faced with this old memory of myself that I know is me, that is definitely also not who I am now. And so it's always interesting to see paintings come up in shows that I have shown before, because it doesn't happen that often. Actually, most of the shows that I've done until now have been new works. And then there's always I think I was speaking to a friend about this, where you talk about the humiliation of being an artist, kind of this idea that you look back at your work and you're like, oh my goodness, who was that? Because you're always growing, or you hope you are. So you should look back at your work and be like, that's different. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's anything negative. It's just, I can't recognize that now because I've changed. And I think that kind of goes along with the theory of my practice too, which is, can you recognize yourself after those moments have passed? I want to work with sound. I really want to see if my practice can bring sound into it, because soundtracks have always played a really important role. And I think it's just because, or I don't want to undermine it, it's not just because, but I know there's something really interesting about spending your whole life listening to soundtracks. It makes you feel like you're constantly in a movie until you wake up from it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I've been listening to too many soundtracks. That's kind of the way it kind of feels. And I think I have an interest in soundtracks in relation to painting that I want to talk about more within my work, or see how they can have a conversation with each other and see what kind of other forms of making art come into my practice. So that's one. And also installations, I find really exciting. I think my studio is actually an installation itself. I'm always thinking about the space and what I can add to it, and bringing my actual memories into the space through color, through actual objects. And it's just become this kind of playground, which is really exciting for the work. And things that happen in the studio, what influences how my practice or how my shows come about. And so in terms of my artist practice, I'm willing for it to go anywhere. Yeah, but I do want to travel more. I think to experience life means that you can create. And for me, I think that the biggest inspiration for me in terms of art is living. And so Japan is on the table regardless. Like, I have to go back, and I'm hoping to go back at the end of this year. But until then, I am taking from the memories of places that I've been before, especially Venice. I've been to Venice a few times because of the Biennale, and now I'm showing in it. And I think that is such an interesting way to go back to a place, to be a part of it when you've been a spectator before. And Venice was one of the first places that I started writing properly. Japan inspired me to write in my head, but then Venice was the first time that I probably sat. I went on a trip on my own and just actually sat in a cafe and wrote and drew. And I just find it so romantic in that sense of being an artist, and how the city actually kind of is built for artists to just create, but it is used for a lot of tourism. So it's a battle in some ways. But yeah, there's a lot I want to do.